Hello, and welcome back to Things Are Going Great For Me, a podcast about the arts and the entertainment business. My name is J. Claude Deering. I'm an actor and a comedian. If you're new here, welcome. Pull up a chair and get comfortable, because we want you all to enjoy yourselves. Or like I said last week, take me with you when you go to vote. Whether you're dropping off your ballot or voting early in person, I'd love to be part of that important moment for you. On each episode of this series, you'll hear from huge movie stars, big TV stars, and even some bright, shining Broadway stars, as well as second guest interviews with exciting up-and-coming comics and actors and established producers, authors, and writers. We banked all the episodes, which also makes this series a time capsule of events that occurred throughout an historic summer. You can follow me, your host, at J. Claude Deering on both Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow our show handles on Twitter and Instagram at Things Are Going Great For Me. There you'll find our link tree that has links for our email list and Patreon. We've got fancy special items up on our Patreon right now. We've uploaded a few additional minutes from my interview with movie star Chris Pine from back in April of this year. Pine reflected on the pause the movie industry was about to take with the U.S. starting to shut down businesses and life as we knew it. He also talks about shooting a pandemic movie early in his career called Carriers. And for all you Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans, we've also uploaded 20 additional minutes from my interview with Melissa Fumero. We talk about some of our memories from college, our favorite acting teachers. Melissa also talks about giving birth to her second son right at the beginning of a global pandemic. We've also added a mini audio series to the Patreon called The Quar Pod, in which I ask our guests Chantel Tui, Christine Woods, and Sarah Paxton about the quarantine and how it's changing life in Hollywood in the time of Corona. You can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/thingsaregoinggreatforme. Here comes the rate and subscribe part. If you like any of what you hear today, please do us a big kindness. Subscribe to the show, leave us a nice comment, tell your aunt about us, give us those 5 stars wherever you're getting your podcast from today. Hey, Apple Podcast peeps, we see you Spotify folks. Hey now, Stitcher fam. What's up, you freaky pocket casts cats? Hey, Breaker brethren and sistren. Salutations, Radio Public people. Hello, you overcast outroverts. Welcome to the party, Google Podcasters. We love you all equally, and we hope you love what you hear, and we want to keep bringing you new episodes of this show. And by the way, we're thrilled to be sponsored for this limited series by Icelandic Glacial, the purest tasting water on Earth, sourced from the legendary Ulfus Spring in Iceland, naturally filtered through ancient lava rock, and certified carbon neutral for both product and operation. You are what you drink. Be a force of nature. Icelandic Glacial, natural spring water, sourced from Iceland. Available on Amazon, IcelandicGlacial.com, and a retailer near you. This episode may be my personal favorite, and it's a long one, but it's a really good one. Today's first guest is Rightor Doyle. Rightor is a SAG-nominated actor for Best Comedy Ensemble for his role as Nick Nickleby on the Peabody Award-winning and multiple Emmy Award-winning HBO comedy, Barry. He's also the creator and director of Netflix's dark comedy series, Bonding. Rightor talks about making his Broadway debut. He also talks about his audition for Barry, our work together at the renowned Williamstown Theater Festival, and the process of selling 2 different TV series. Rightor is hilarious and brilliant and wonderfully candid. I'll be speaking with him in a few minutes. And a little bit later, you'll also get my interview with Elna Baker. Elna is a celebrated comedian, author, and longtime producer of the Pulitzer Prize-winning landmark radio series, This American Life. We talk about her producing and storytelling work on This American Life and what she looks for in a story, her upbringing in the Mormon Faith, her inspiring journey with self-love and body positivity. She's also the first person on this series who is a survivor of COVID-19. I've known Elna since the 8th grade. She's one of my best friends. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss it. Joining me again today is my producer and co-host, Winston Carter.
How you doing, man? How's life?
I'm good, man.
I feel, as your friend, like I don't do enough now based on Elna's episode.
What do you mean?
Based on this, I'm like, oh man, oh boy, I knew Claude had like well-to-do friends, but like, I'm not doing enough. I'm like, I have to like up my friend resume.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, some may be well-to-do, some maybe are not, but they are all very accomplished. Yeah. Mm-hmm. These 2 folks are they're both brilliant, and I'm completely in awe of their accomplishments. They're also really fun in their interviews.
Yes, they are.
This is about as candid and fun in terms of interviews as we've had. So, with Barry, are you a big Barry fan?
I am. I'm a bearhead. So that's what we call ourselves. We call ourselves bearheads.
Okay. Did you
Yeah, I
discover it?
love Barry.
Did you discover it right away, or was it a show that you had to hear it from some people first?
No, I watched it. I watched season 1, and then I was like, season 1 I dug because I'm a Bill Hader's Bill Hader's Oklahoma, Tulsan specifically. So
Oh yeah,
those
that's
of us
right. Yeah.
from Tulsa, Oklahoma, like I think he went. My brother and him like had some minor run-in because he went to there's only a couple big private schools, and I think he went to the other one that I didn't go to, but much further ahead of me. So like, yeah, I've had some run-ins with him, and he's worked with some people I've worked with, like Mark Potts. So I was like, oh, he's got a show. Ooh, I want to check it out. And then I was like, season 1, I dug, but then season 2,
It's just insane.
chef's kiss, perfect.
Did you like? Have you listened to any of Elna's stuff on This American Life? I know that
Yeah.
her stuff is so good on there. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to any of it.
I listened to a little bit of it. I also didn't want to. This is a weird thing that I try not to do, whereas like people who I might tangentially know. So like this is like a real friend of yours. So I'm like, I know the odds of me ever meeting this person are very slim. But in the off chance that I do, I don't want to have listened to a ton of them talking about stuff and know too much about them. It makes me very uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
You mean if you eventually met Elna? It would make you uncomfortable if you knew too much about
'cause I'd
her
be
life?
like, I would absolutely bring up, like, I know this about you. It would be terrible.
You would? You'd immediately bring
probably.
up. I know this very personal thing about you. Is that how you are when you meet celebrities? Because I would assume you know things about those people, right?
Well, I'm not great at meeting celebrities. I have not met many.
I'm not great at it.
I've met.
Yeah, I'm not great at it either.
Yeah. I met Jason Reitman once, and it was like borderline the most embarrassing moment of my life.
Oh, do tell.
It was just like I went and saw a screening of Jeff. What's that? Jeff Who Lives at Home.
Okay.
And he produced that movie, and it was and we were walking out at the same time. My girlfriend was there, Erica, and we're walking out. And I'm like at the time was a huge fan. I mean, he makes good movies, but at the time he was like just coming off of Up in the Air, which was like, I loved that movie. And we're walking out of the Chinese theater at the same time, and we're kind of walking alone. And I was like, hey man, I don't do this, but like, I just have to tell you, like, I'm a big fan. And this is, once you hear this, you'll learn that I've created a rule based on this interaction. And he was like, oh, hey man, thank you so much. And I was like, cool, great. Yeah. Yeah. And you produced this? I like was carrying on this. He was like, oh yeah. What'd you think of this? What'd you think of the movie? And my response was, you know, they have a style, you know, and then he went, all right, man, you have a good day, and walked off.
Oh,
and I was like,
my God. So you gave him, you opened with like kind of a qualifier instead of like a platitude, and he read it right away.
Yeah, just like, I don't have an answer for you. I wasn't planning. So now when I do see someone famous who I'm like, I have something to say to them, because either they're like, I saw Thomas Sadowski once on the street, and I was just like, hey, I really like your work. Have a good day. And they're like, all right, you too. And then you like, because that's
the way to do it.
I think you have to know that like what I'm doing here is getting something for me, and I'm going to put as little onus on you for this interaction as possible.
Right.
I'm going to say a thing. It's going to be complimentary. So you'll be like, feel good. Cause who doesn't like having a compliment? And then I'm immediately going to leave. I'm immediately giving you an out, a verbal and physical out.
Yeah.
So there's no extra time.
All right, folks. Well, as always, you've been very patient with us. We're going to keep this one quick today. Without further ado, here now is the hugely talented and extremely charming writer, Doyle.
I strangely think that I'm still 21 and really fighting for it. I've always thought of myself as an underdog, which is maybe insane, but it's been a very helpful way for me to think about my life and my career as someone who is like ambitious, and I think has tried very hard to do things with good intentions, but also as trying to really make something and do something. And I know that we all in this particular industry think and feel those types of things, and we certainly started together. And it's wild to think of how long it's been since even we had done Williamstown together. But I guess I just haven't thought it in terms of my 20s and my 30s. When I was 26, I made my Broadway debut, and that show closed 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And now I think about it and I'm like, oh my God, that's actually great. Cause I don't think I wanted to do that show for a year. Even though I really loved it, it was like very taxing because I'd never done a Broadway show before, and I didn't realize I got my equity card doing it. So I didn't realize that every time that you moved a table, that you would have to do it every night, and they like paid you an extra $10 or whatever equity does if you like move some furniture. And I volunteered for every. Every single thing.
I don't understand. Sorry. What are you talking about? I know
like
you're talking about this show Enron the musical, right?
It wasn't technically a musical, but there was some music in it.
Okay. What was it called?
It was just called Enron.
It was just called Enron. Jesus, that's funny. And so, but it had done. This show did well over in the UK, right?
Oh, it did. It did unbelievably well. I mean, it was a great. It's a beautifully written play by Lucy Preble, who's maybe one of the smartest people I've ever met. And she writes for Succession now, and she writes plays, and she's incredible. And directed by Rupert Gould, who I think is also a genius man. And it was a satire, commentary on America, on the financial system, on capitalism, and right at the beginning of a recession. I don't think really anyone wanted to see that in the U.S., which was fine. I mean, like, listen, I was thrilled to be in it, and I'm thrilled to have done it.
But why were you moving? What do you mean you were moving tables?
Oh, well, when you move, I don't really know how this works because, again, I got my equity card and I don't know shit about anything. So apparently when you move, like in a scene change, if you move a particular object during a scene, you get like a little pay bump.
Oh,
and so I volunteered to move every chair and every table
just to make your New York rent.
And I got to tell you, I was exhausted.
Yeah?
2 weeks in, 2 weeks into doing the show, I was like, I cannot believe that I gave myself this track in the show.
Yeah.
What an idiot. And I think everyone else in the cast was snickering behind a curtain, being like, I can't believe he volunteered for all that shit.
Well, I think what's interesting is that, like, for you and I, when we got our sort of theater background and our education and some of those credentials, and it's like, but most of the time we're never doing more than a month-long or 2-month-long run.
Yeah.
Somewhere regionally, off Broadway, even off Broadway. And then when you get to, if you do a Broadway show, I mean, you hear stories constantly about people who just get burned out because they're doing 8 shows a week for a year, for longer. I mean, didn't they say, isn't it famous that like Lin-Manuel Miranda's understudy did more performances of Hamilton than he did? I mean, I guess that's not shocking, but I think within the first year maybe that it was on Broadway. Am I wrong?
Oh, I didn't know that. I did see his understudy, who I thought was very wonderful.
Javier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought he was incredible.
We've talked about him on this series too. Yeah. So you and I, we know each other originally from this regional theater summer stock place called Williamstown, Massachusetts.
Yes.
And gosh, I mean, we had such a fun summer. I feel like at Williamstown we were all smoking cigarettes and getting hammered every night on cheap beer and cheap whiskey. Were you smoking cigarettes too?
Yes.
Do you still?
Occasionally.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I pick it up and put it down. I think that there's I now have built some healthy restraint. I don't think I had any restraint then. But I don't think we really needed to. But
right.
I'm from New Orleans, so I got all that stuff deep inside of me. You know, it's hard to shake it.
Yeah. Are you drinking still?
Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
yeah. Luckily, I mean, I would say luckily the Irish and New Orleansness didn't equal alcoholism. But
Yeah.
when I drink, I usually do the thing that I really want to do, which is eat everything in my fridge. So that's
Right. Right.
I remember someone once said to me like, oh my God, at 5 p.m. aren't you longing for a drink? Like, can't you just wait to have your first drink? And I was like, I can't wait to eat a hot dog. Like, that's what I really think about.
Do you is it this thing that we I mean I'm not very well studied in things that deal with like addiction, but I absolutely have compulsive behavior. It's if it's not food, if it's not like substances, it's I've noticed it's my phone. Are you getting the phone thing too?
Oh my God. I mean, you know, yeah.
Doesn't it
I'm
fuck you up when you go down a wormhole on your phone and you discover like 10 people you didn't know about but are mutual friends with everybody that you know and are doing so much better than you are?
Well, I'm a single gay man, so I people often are using their phones for, meeting other people, da 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 da. I don't have any of the sex apps on my phone. Not that I wouldn't or don't. I just don't think it's very sexy to like just meet someone without knowing them. I sort of like the will they won't they. That's kind of like the sexier part of it for me, like meeting someone somewhere.
Yeah.
Which is all to say that I really just haven't had any sex in the pandemic. If that's that's what I'm moving toward. But my phone, yeah, I think Instagram, things like that are places where you can just fall down the rabbit hole of this person, who's this person? Oh my God, look at them now. I mean, like I'm like staring at your kids on the
Yeah.
internet. I don't even know you had kids,
Yeah.
and
Too.
now I'm deeply involved in your family.
Yeah, I know. There was a time when I didn't think I would post photos of my kids at all for privacy reasons, and then I don't know, like it just when you become a parent, it's hard not to like. I probably have on my phone now about 5,000 photos of mostly my family, and it's overwhelming. And I think that and none of them you can't delete any of them. So because you don't know which of these is like going to be that photo that you wanted to see again when you're an older person and your kids like don't talk to you anymore.
God.
So I think like you get this overwhelming feeling of where you're like, people need to see this. People need to see how beautiful this moment is or how important this moment is to me. And then so it's you end up doing a lot of sharing of kids' photos, and then we'll get a dog, and then it'll be all dog photos, I guess, will be the next thing.
Well, dogs and kids, dogs and
Yeah.
kids. I think you've got to. That's the real magic formula for Instagram: dogs and kids, right?
That's right. Somebody did ask me
I'll
once,
come over
like,
to your house to use your dogs and your kids to like get more likes on my photos.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody did ask me about that once. They were like, "Do you post photos of like your kid for? Is like, do you get a lot of likes when you do that?" And I think people do when they post that first photo of like, oh, we just had a kid, and your whole phone lights up. Of course, like the endorphins are firing on all cylinders, but
Right.
I think when we you know what that feels like, probably more so when you have a big career success and everybody is jumping on to wish you congratulations. And I think like those moments are I mean, it feels nice that people are sharing in that moment with you. It allows you to hold on to those moments a little bit longer in a world in which it's very hard to hold on to a feeling of happiness. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I think I heard it once said that the minute that you think that you're happy, happiness goes away.
Yeah, that's what drugs are for.
Right.
Drugs, I think, like they hold you in that moment. They keep you present. This is a pro-drug podcast.
Yeah, what kind of drugs what drugs are we talking about?
I mean,
and who's your doctor?
I'm not that crazy. I mean, for me, it's mostly weed, and it's occasionally like mushrooms, but like that's kind of it, or having a drink. Like that's pretty much it.
Mushrooms, Molly, occasionally Molly. Are the kids still calling it Molly? Is that the thing now?
Is what the thing?
Are the kids still calling it Molly? What are we? I mean, I don't know. Have we moved on from that name?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I did do that one time. I did it in classically the wrong fashion. I was like I had moved to LA. I was with a group of people at a gym that I was working at. I was working at Crunch Fitness, folding towels.
Okay.
And I went out with a group of those folks and didn't really know anybody, and except for one guy who was a friend of mine who had ecstasy, and I took one pill. And then immediately, as I started to feel it, looked around and was like, oh, I don't know anybody here, and I'm feeling weird. So I went to the bathroom, thought I was going to throw up, didn't. And then I paid for like an LA cab home to where I was living in the Valley, and this was before Uber, so it was like a $60 cab for a 20-minute cab ride. And then I just stared at my face in the mirror for like an hour and a half and went to bed.
And did you end up really liking your face?
I mean, anytime you're on a drug and you're looking at your face, like I don't know that I've ever loved my face. I think I have moments where I see myself in the mirror and I'll start talking to myself when I'm high. Do you do that?
Yeah. Yes. Sure. Yes.
What will you say to yourself?
I think I talk to myself all the time.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really do that as much. I will talk to myself in fragments, and it's usually something like, you stupid fucking idiot. It's like that, and then nothing. But I don't say like, I gotta get up now and brush my teeth.
Yeah, well, okay, well that's not what I'm doing either. I don't know who you think is doing that, but I don't think anyone's doing that.
Why am I making a musical out of every play you've done and now out of your life?
You know, I don't know. I just think you associate like homosexuality with musicals, I guess, which is just, that's your bigotry. I'm gonna leave that with you.
No, I majored in, God, I've talked about it too much on this series. I promote musical theater a lot on here because I did it in college. And
did you talk to Chris Pine about musical theater?
No, but you know what? That summer, when I was an apprentice with Chris Pine in 2002 at Williamstown, we threw together, apprentices threw together a chorus line, and we fucking threw it together in like 2 days. Learned all the music.
Original choreo?
I did some fucking tap dancing, and like I sang, and it was a shit show. But we did it like in Upper Greylock. Is that what it's called? Where the cafeteria is?
Yeah.
So we put it on. Everybody in the cast was drunk. Everybody in the audience was drunk, and like I did my little dumb number. And Pine did come up at the end and was like, "Deering," he was like, "That was fucking phenomenal, man." And I felt really. Immediately in that moment, I was like, "Oh God, this was probably really bad."
Yeah, no, this is your calling. I mean, you didn't stop you.
Didn't stop me.
How many summers did you do Williamstown?
I just did 2. I did my apprentice year. I auditioned a couple times to get back in. I had an audition for a play that was going up that I did like a monologue from Long Day's Journey into Night, and I think I did it a little too convincingly with maybe the coughing at the end, because I think they were genuinely worried for me because I was doing Edmund, and I think I really sold the consumption at the end. And so, I think Amanda Charlton said something to me like, I don't know, she was like, I think we worried for you.
Oh my God, that sounds very hurt. Yeah.
So I didn't get back in that year, but it was the next year, and I do remember saying to Amanda that year, and maybe Steven, I think I remember saying like, I need to get out of LA, please. Like,
right? Yeah.
I need a break, and they let me in that year, and that's when you and I met. Yeah. How about you? How many seasons did you do there?
I did 3. I think we did my first one together, and then I did 2 more after that. Maybe I'm mistaken.
I think I was supposed to go back for that following year, maybe with you and Steve O'Reilly and Heather Lind.
Right. Right.
I think I got in, but I had booked like a Shonda Rhimes pilot in a sort of like a little recurring co-star role, and everybody on that show, she was executive producing it. So I don't think it was her. It wasn't like I don't think she created it, but she was exec producing it. But anyway, everybody on that show was like, well, this show is going to go for 10 years.
Right. Yeah. Oh God.
And so I think I said to the folks at Williamson, I was like, I like, this may get picked up in June, and I wouldn't want to leave halfway through. And then of course the show it did not get picked up.
Of course, as is the way. But yeah, I did 3 years. I auditioned the first time I auditioned, I got in, which was great. And having said that out loud, I realized that is a dumb thing to say out loud. But I didn't know much about it, I guess is what I'm trying to infer, is that I wasn't an apprentice. I didn't really know much about it. I just heard that this is what you're supposed to do in the summer to meet other professionals to keep working to find work. And so I auditioned to be a nonic, and I got in, and then I did it for 2 summers after that. And honestly, it changed my entire life. And I'm so grateful to Amanda Charlton and Roger Rees, rest in peace, and Nikki Martin, rest in peace, for giving me these opportunities.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It is a wonderful place, and people should, if they're interested, should apply. When are auditions usually? In December?
Yeah, I guess so. They must be maybe January. I actually don't remember.
I remember
look it up online, kids.
Yeah, WTFestival.org, as I recall. So you currently play Nick on the HBO show Barry, and you're now a SAG Award nominated actor for Best Ensemble in a Comedy Series. Congratulations.
I'm sure people were voting just for me when that was happening.
The show has received 30 Primetime Emmy nominations. Jesus Christ. Both Bill Hader and Henry Winkler have won Emmys. I think Bill Hader has won 2, right?
Yeah. Yes.
For their portrayals of Barry Berkman and Gene Cousineau, respectively. The tone of the show is very specific, and you would think it might be almost impossible to pull it off, but you all do it very masterfully. Was it clear to everybody that they had a hit show on their hands? Was that the vibe in the beginning?
I definitely thought when we filmed the pilot that we were making something different. So, and I think that different is a good word for it, because I think often, like you were saying with your, like, oh my God, this could run for 10 years or da-da-da-da. I thought this is really strange, and what they're doing is so specific. And either people are really going to love it, or I don't think that it will ever see the light of day. But it felt very special to me, and not special, and I think to everyone who was working on it. But I think that had a lot to do with Bill and Alec Berg, our other showrunner and writer of the show. They cast everyone on the show, and they said, listen, if you can think of a better joke, if you can think of a better thing to say, if you can think of something to do, we want that. Yeah. And it's not like an improv-a-thon. We do rehearsals. Bill loves to rehearse because of SNL, and the rehearsals are really free form. It's like, here's the script, and now let's put the script down and see what happens. And it's just a bunch of really game, really expert comic actors, and no one's trying to be the funniest person in the room. Everyone's trying to give the story some weight while also at the same time being funny. So it's been an incredible experience to work on, and I'm so grateful. I tried for a million years to get on an HBO show, and then the minute I was like, I quit acting and I don't want to do this anymore, I went to one audition and I got this job, and it made me fall in love with the very thing that I do. Nice.
That's so cool. Tell me a little more about like the audition. Were you improvising in the audition?
Yeah. So I in full disclosure, I was at the time trying to sell this show, Bonding, which is now on Netflix. And in that same day, I had a meeting for Bonding, and I had just done an episode of Girls that had aired on HBO, and the casting directors of Barry, I don't know how it all happened, but they were like, they'd love you to come in for one of the of Barry's classmates, and I didn't have a lot of time, and maybe was being lazy, and didn't read the script. And in the car, I saw, when I was trying to learn the lines before the audition, I saw that they were composite sides, which I guess maybe there's a different term for it, but it just means that the characters in the pilot are so small that you just read all of the male classmate characters. So there was a character named Antonio.
Okay.
There's another guy. Da, da, da. So it was really choose your own adventure. And the guy, Antonio, was a night cop. And I was like, I'm never going to get the role of Antonio, the night cop. So I might as well just come at it from my angle, which is a gay one. And so I walked in, I was like, hello, I'm Antonio, I'm a night cop, and I just sort of like did all the lines as they were, but just played it a little slightly fey, slightly played up that part of myself. And then they asked me, oh, by the way, it was the casting director's assistant. And it was just on tape. And she asked me to then improv in this whatever character I had just made up. And I improved about my struggles in Los Angeles. And at the very end, as a twist, I said that my girlfriend was an actress too. So I sort of played Faye this whole time. And then at the end told everyone I had a girlfriend.
Gotcha. All right. And you a little sneak surprise.
A little sneak attack at the end.
Yeah.
And I knew I had done well. I left and I called my agent and I said, hey, I think I did a good job, so you should just follow up with that. But it was for the casting assistant, so I didn't really know how far I was going to get there. And 2 weeks later, I got a call from everyone saying that I had gotten the job.
Oh my God, really? It was one of those?
Yeah.
It was just assistant on tape and you booked it.
Yeah, I never met Bill. I never met Alec. I met the casting director in passing as I was leaving. And that was it. So the first day I met everyone was to walk into the reading, and they had made a character based on my improv. And his name was Nick. We cut out the part about me being having a girlfriend, but all of those things.
But you kept the night cop.
yeah. Someone else got to be the night cop. But they just sort of tailor made the thing to my improv. I think I said it was Florida. Then I said I was from Florida. They put that in the show, like all these sorts of things. So it was really cool. It felt like they really cared and were listening, and I was there because they, saw something in me. And I think I've had a lot of great opportunities, and I feel very, very lucky, but rarely do you walk in and people who you think of as like comedy legends. I mean, Alec Berg was one of the, one of the writers of Seinfeld, and Bill Hader is Bill Hader, and you're there with Henry Winkler and Stephen Root and all these incredible actors. And they're like, Rightor, I don't know, can you think of anything funnier to say? And I'm like, sure. It's been a real blessing. That sounds cheesy, but it's true.
Yeah, and now you're all on you've been renewed for a third season, and what's happening with that right now?
Well, we were supposed to start in April, and what year is it now? And so I don't think we're starting until 2021, but there's no real start date for us. But I'm not really sure what will happen, but we'll definitely do a third season of the show. I think they're just being very careful, as they should be. Yeah, that show is definitely coming back. I would stake my entire career. No, I'm not going to stake my career on anything. Yeah. I need the whatever I have. Yeah, you've staked your life on your career, so let's keep your career in like a safe bin,
So before you wrote Bonding, and I want to talk about that, you wrote this other series that was that you did with Refinery 29 when they were just sort of starting to release projects, and it was called The Walker. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. You are correct. Yeah.
And this was about a gay best friend for hire.
Yes. I like monetizing. Monetizing strange things as a job. I think that's a fun angle, I have a lot of best girlfriends, and I, after doing Enron, I got, again, like I said, the thing that I always strive to do was to be in a Broadway show. It wasn't to be on movies or in TV. It certainly wasn't to write anything. I was in a Broadway show, and I thought, well, time to get a new dream, baby, And so I had always written, and one of my best friends, Zoe Kazan, also writes. We shared the same agent, and I
Yeah.
showed Zoe this concept for the walker, and she said, you should show that to our agent at the time, Jen Conowall, who's now a great manager, not mine, but she's an amazing person. And so she was like, oh, I know a finance guy. I love this idea. And we met with the finance guy, and all of my best girlfriends wanted to do it. And they're all, very schmancy. It's Zoe Kazan and Betty Gilpin and Carrie Mulligan play the three leads, and Lily Raven, Aya Cash, and Gabby Sidibe, and all these people were in the show. Caitlin Fitzgerald. It was like Heather Lind. So it was one of those things where the stars really aligned, and I wrote it very quickly, and we made it very quickly. I didn't direct it, but it was certainly kind of slapdash, but I think that there was really something there, and we screened it in Los Angeles, and the Littlefield company, Warren Littlefield, who used to be the head of NBC during the must-see TV years, who now does like Handmaid's Tale and stuff. He saw, or someone from his company saw the show, and they brought me in, and they wanted to develop it into an actual TV show, which is crazy because this was the first thing I'd ever written. And all of a sudden I'm like going into development meetings with like the former head of NBC who like greenlit like Golden Girls and Friends,
Yeah.
And so they were absolutely wonderful. We ended up at Sony with the project. And then just over time, as the story goes, it just slowly started to fall apart. I think through no fault of anyone's, really. We ended up at the tail end of a pilot pitch season. And most people had used up all their money by then. They were like, please come back next year actually with the same idea, and let's get the ball rolling. And I didn't know that much about writing. I didn't know that much about structure. I didn't know that much about much. And I thought I knew everything a little bit. So I was like, well, I'll just write it like this and then it'll be fine. And then you go through rounds and rounds of notes. And it was an exhausting way of getting to learn how to write, or what I even like to write. But the Littlefield company was so patient with me. But ultimately, the show kind of fell apart. So when it did, long story long, a girl named Christine D'Souza, who has become a very good friend of mine, became an agent at WME, and she had seen the web series version of it at that LA screening. And she said, I'm at WME, and I'd love to, and I had let go of my agents as time had gone by with the Walker. And she was like, I'd love you to come over with us, and I'd love to sell the Walker just in the form that it's in today. So we went to Refinery 29, and they said we'd love to buy it as is, and it was the first show that they put on their website when they were doing tons of content.
That's amazing. It's to be friends with the famous people that you are friends with, and I feel like as long as I've known you, you've been very close with sort of very powerful and successful women in this business. And I wanted to say, like, I remember, like, you had this great ability, as I recall, to say exactly what a person needed to hear. Which was, like, for me too, like, I remember, like, on more than a few occasions, of something about a performance of mine or about social stuff that was going on. I feel like you are really good, like, you read people really well, which makes you incredibly charming.
Yeah.
How aware are you that you're good at that?
I am aware. I'm aware that I have that. But I guess I just don't know it any other way. I think that when I was a kid, I was kind of a very difficult and angry child. And through lots of therapy, here I am. But I knew that when I was on, like when I was happy or felt good, that I had a weird kind of special dynamic quality that people are attracted to. But there was like a very dark element to that. and I had a very sharp tongue, and I really could figure out what was the meanest thing I could say to my mom, a family member, a friend, and I would lash out at people like that, and I often thought of it as a real weapon. And I eventually became quite ashamed of that part of myself. And I think as I grew older, I realized that charm and that vitriol were the same thing, and that like my ability to see the part of a person you could hurt the most was also somehow compassion as well. And if I could like use those powers for good, that I could that those things could work to my advantage. So I often I guess I thought about it that way once I got my anger issues under control. Ultimately, I guess I am good at reading people, but I don't know. I guess I don't think about it that much.
Yeah, it's become effortless. Yeah, you just are. You are just a charming. I'm not going to say debonair because I don't want it to sound.
God. Everyone listening to this podcast right now is like, not really.
I just don't want to be accused of saying that it's another musical theater.
Oh my God, do it. What were you going to say?
So more recently, you sold this show to Netflix called Bonding. Mm-hmm. Which was based on a job that you had at one time as a bodyguard for a dominatrix.
Yes, that is true.
Can you tell me, like, how did that come about? And I'm not talking about the show. I'm talking about the job.
So one of my best friends from home had also lived in New York City, and I hadn't seen her in a very long time, and we went for a walk through Central Park, and she told me what she was doing to make money, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. I'd never heard of that before. And she then later said, sometimes I need people to come with me to kind of be a witness or a protector if I do like these off-site jobs, go to people's homes, and you could make X amount of dollars for doing it with me. And I had 4 jobs in New York. I was selling concessions at the New York Theater Workshop. I was assisting a gardener taking up soil to like penthouses in New York. I'm 21 years old, so I said, yes, sure, I would do that. And it was very eye-opening. I was also had just come out of the closet. So I lived with this sort of like deep, what I thought was like my like deep, dark secret, but everybody always knew I was gay, but I sort of lived with this version of my sexuality being ashamed of that, and was thrust into a world where people were not only not ashamed necessarily, but they could name their desire so clearly. They named it so clearly that they could pay for it. And I think in retrospect, it really changed the way that I thought about my own sexuality, because I was like, wow, they aren't ashamed. They're like telling someone and paying someone to help them like do the thing that they really want to do that's not hurting anyone, and I'm not hurting anyone, and like, why can't I be that clear with myself? And so it was deeply formative, strangely, but but at the time it was just a great party story. I just told this really epic story of like the first time that it had ever happened, and it always got the crowds going. So after I had sold the Walker and then that fell apart, my manager Dara said, what's next? And I was like, well, I have 3 good party stories. Let me tell them to you, and let me see if you think there's a show in any of them.
That's
great. And when I told her that, she was like, let's do that. I said, okay, let's do that.
Now, Bonding features some explicit sexual content.
Is it? There's no nudity.
Well, Yeah, it's a really good, yeah, like it's explicit in the way that it's I would say intimate.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
explicitly intimate, that show.
sure. Yeah,
It
yeah.
includes scenes where folks are getting peed on. There are scenes where there was a scene I really thought was great with somebody getting tickled and crying out for their mother.
Yes.
Are these specific experiences, or were they imagined? How much did you see, Rightor?
Well, so, some of them are specific, but I would say most of them are not. The circumstances are imagined, but the reality of the situation was my girlfriend, who is she wanted to remain anonymous as she has her own other life now. She would tell me about a lot of these things, and when I was looking to develop the show, I leaned on her very heavily to help me navigate a lot of these waters,
Got it.
piss waters, you know.
Right.
But I'm also, as a gay person, I think that people pee on each other more than you think.
Oh yeah. I'm glad that you assumed that I don't pee on people or that people don't pee on me.
No, I mean, like,
I
listen,
don't know why I'm glad. I mean, it's fine if that's a thing.
yeah, please, just try it out if you haven't already.
It's a quarter-hour series, and as The Guardian put it, the first season can be binged in under 3 hours.
Good. Yes, I'm glad that's a good review. That's a good review.
It's not. It's. I'm trying to endorse it. I really enjoy it. I really enjoyed it, and you also wrote this recently. I think this was recently. You wrote this beautiful piece about being in love with a best friend who happened to be a woman,
Yeah.
and you have a line in Bonding where the character Pete says, "It's cool to be bi now." Do you think if we were all a little more honest about our sexuality that would solve a lot of problems?
Yes, but I know how difficult that can be,
Yeah.
But I think that even, like, honestly, it's cool to be bi now. It's a joke, but it's also probably like a dated joke because people the kids are so much cooler than that now,
Right.
pansexual. There's all kinds of there. I find labels were very helpful to me. Labels helped me construct an identity for myself that I was having trouble naming, and
Yeah.
I think now labels seem passe, and I think it's fucking cool. I wish I
Right.
had more of that in me, But yes, I do believe that there is a scale, and that we are all on it. And I do
Yeah.
think that love, and this is what I've explored in the Walker and in Bonding, but that you kind of can't, you really can't choose who you love, and you can't choose, in terms of sexuality, you can't really choose how that defines you. But ultimately you can choose to accept it, and everyone has some version of coming out. It's not just for gay people anymore.
Right.
Everyone has some version of that, whether it's telling your partner that I like this, or this nipple is sensitive, but there's actually nothing on the other one, so stop trying to twist my right nipple, because there's like literally you can't feel a fucking thing, or whatever. Like, and being able to be honest with someone like that and have them hear you, and have an open dialogue is I think, well, really what we should all be after. And I think that's a big part of the show. And that's why there is not a lot of nudity on it, by the way. It's like it's a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. It's very colorful, it's very bright, it's fast and very bold and funny. But ultimately, the show is really about communication and loving another person, even if you don't really know how or why you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's next for that series?
So we filmed a second season, and we finished it 2 weeks before we went into quarantine. I flew back to Los Angeles, and we did the edit in 2 weeks, and then we started post remotely. And it's all turned into Netflix, and hopefully will come out in fall, winter this year.
That's great.
Yeah.
What else? What else is on the horizon for you? What else are you working on? Are you working on anything else, or is that your plate is pretty full?
Well, now I'm trying to. I'm writing some other things at the moment, that I'm working my way through. But also, I hope that people like season 2 of Bonding, and we get to do another one. I would love to do one more, and um, yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. I'm lucky because I get to act and I get to write and direct. I mean, I never thought I would get to do any of these things really, and somehow I stuck it out long enough to get in there, and people trusted me to do things that I'd never done before. Before I directed the first season of Bonding, I'd never directed anything in my entire life, and I just said, I know how to do this, and they said, okay.
Yeah.
So they let me. I couldn't be more like I'm dumbfounded, that this has all happened this way.
I like the directing on it a lot. What was your like when you'd get a directing assignment for your first project? I mean, I feel like I would buy every like Taschen book on Stanley Kubrick and like all the sort of like the legends, and just
Right.
like frantically be looking at all the pages for like how do you set up a shot, and you did it, I thought, really, really well. Did you panic? I mean, how much panic went into directing?
No, I'm a very delusional, egotistical person, so I was not panicked at all. I
Oh my
thought I
God,
was
really?
I thought I was supposed to do it. I really genuinely I hope this doesn't come off as idiocy or like insane, but I genuinely knew that I should do this, and I thought that this was I thought that I maybe started as an actor to finally get me here to directing, which took a lot of the things that I think I do pretty well and put them together in this way. So did I do a bunch of research on, what lens, what da da da, like, no, not really. I interviewed a bunch of people to be the DP, to do all
Yeah.
the things. Nate Hertzler is our DP, who's amazing. He's like my right hand man. We do everything together. And the first time that we had a meeting, I said, "Hey, listen, I've never done this before. I don't know the word that is the right word. You should tell me that word when we come across it, because I'd love to know, because I am a sponge and I want to learn. But ultimately, I'm the first person who's going to admit to you that I know what I want. I just don't know how to get there. And we have to talk about that together."
Yeah.
So I think you come at it like from the standpoint of a humble learner.
Yeah, totally. I think like one of the things that I liked was that, like, I mean, I liked how the shots were set up, but also I liked there were moments where you would hold on the main two characters. I feel like there were a few of those moments where you're not cutting away. These are two people making direct eye contact,
Yeah.
and we just get to sit, and it's a 15-minute episode, and you're spending all these seconds with these people connecting with each other in a simple moment, but the pace never really feels slow.
Yeah. It's a highly cinematic thing to do. And we didn't make the show originally for Netflix. We made it for another company, and Netflix, we went to Cannes to the television series. We got into their first version of the television version of Cannes, and it was screened there. So we had like some buzz around us when we came back to Los Angeles, and a bunch of networks called and said, how do we redevelop this show? We made it for not a lot of money. And they're like, how do we redevelop this show for this network or this network or this network? And then Netflix called and said, we love the show. We don't want to talk about season 1. We'd love Rightor to come in and pitch a season 2. And I was like, what? So I walked into Netflix, and they, all the things, they're like, the color story, your shots, all the things that people had not yet said to me, because they're like, wow, it's great. This is very exciting. And they really had watched it and and kind of received what I was trying to do, and sometimes failing at, but at least trying to do. And they said, we don't want to change it. We'd like to buy it. And let us hear your thoughts about moving forward with the show, with like another season. So once the show came out and it was a surprise smash, they called and said, so let's do that season 2. So that all goes back to these shots, which is that I knew when we made it initially that I wanted to be as cinematic as I could. I wanted to hold on single takes, to really let the characters live. We don't have a lot of time, and it's hard to communicate chemistry and friendship on camera if you're cutting back and forth between people. And if you let them just live in the frame and you trust the actor and you trust the writing, ultimately, sink or swim, you're going to see whether they've got that chemistry or not. And luckily they did. They're incredible, those two actors, Zoe Levin and Brendan Scannell, who are just, they make the show what it is. But we wanted to make it as beautiful as we possibly could. So we were very particular about setups because we didn't have a lot of money. So I always said, to the actors that this is the box that you're living in. If it says run in the script, you can't run because this is the box, because this is the frame that we've dressed. So ultimately, run in your mind,
Yeah. Did your acting sensibility, does it help with those particular kind of moments?
Yes, absolutely. And I love directing actors because I think I understand that what they are going to bring to it is better than what I ever could have thought about it. So when they come to set, I don't tell them a bunch. I just say, let me see it. And they show it to me, and then we talk about it a little bit. And I usually take them aside and talk to them by themselves. And I want very much for them to feel that they are artists making something, not that they are trying to do what I tell them to do. So
yeah. Now,
nice.
when you're doing Barry with that group of folks, do you guys do acting warm-ups? Do you guys
No.
How much class happens when you're there with Henry Winkler?
Well, so the first day we ever met, after we did the first read through, we did a rehearsal read through. We did a read through with HBO the next day, but we did this rehearsal read through, and then they split the show into half. So all the mob people went into another room and did some improvs about that, and then all of the actors and Henry stayed in the room that we were in, and Henry we did an acting class with Henry Winkler. This is the first day I've ever met him.
Cool.
And it was and these are all these incredibly funny, real people. I think the other thing is that everyone in the show is has been working or trying to work for a very long time. So there's no entitlement. It's a bunch of people who are so grateful to have the job and really love other actors and having a communal experience. So we did that first acting class, and then from that point on, we haven't done any of that really. But we do rehearse and improv and do that kind of stuff.
Well, Rightor, it's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Okay.
You're so fun to talk to.
Oh my God.
I'm thrilled for all of your success. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you, Claude.
And I wish you continued success.
Oh, thank you.
And safety and good health.
You too. And I just want all your listeners to know that Claude, in all the years that I've known him, and I think I've told you this every time I've seen you since, is my internet password. I mean, not my password, my, what is it? My what's it called when your internet has a name? It's Claude.
Your username for your devices is my name?
Yeah. Did you not know that?
It's
because I bought a Buckhead from a consignment store in Adams when we
Oh
were
my
first
God.
doing.
Oh yeah, I do
And I
remember
named
that.
it Claude. So
Yeah.
Claude has been with me through ever since whenever we did Williamstown together. And my internet is named Claude
Oh my
after
God.
you.
That's so
So
touching and
there you go.
also estranging at the same time.
Absolutely. Well, you're dead to me, you know?
Well, there you have it. My conversation with Rightor Doyle. A big thank you again to Rightor for doing it. I hope you all enjoyed it. Before we move on to our second interview, I'm going to take another opportunity to ask you all to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're getting your podcast from today. We've got more incredible interviews with Tembi Locke and Vinny Chibber coming next week. Remember to subscribe to our Patreon to get all our extras with Chris Pine, Melissa Fumero, Baron Vaughn, and our Quarpod series with Chantal Tui, Christine Woods, and Sarah Paxton. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Things Are Going Great For Me. If you like what you hear so far, please give us those 5-star ratings. Leave us a nice comment. We so appreciate all your ratings, reviews, and kind words, and we want to keep bringing you these great episodes. Next up is Elna Baker. We talk about going to high school and college together, the time we got detained and interrogated at the UN building in New York City. Elna reminded me that we are banned from the building for life. We also talk about her memoir, The New York Regional Mormon Singles Halloween Dance, her recovery from COVID, and how to prepare in case you get the virus. Here now is me speaking with my best friend and my senior high school prom date, the wonderful Elna Baker. So, all right. So first of all, earlier this year, you were on an episode of High Maintenance on HBO.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I really like that show.
Oh, I love that show. It's so funny.
And so was that your television debut?
I think I've done tiny things, but yeah, that was my television debut. So, and I was just myself, so it wasn't really acting.
Yeah, you were great. The episode actually featured you in your day job, which is as a producer of the now Pulitzer Prize-winning public radio show, This American Life.
Isn't it cool I get to say that I won a Pulitzer?
It's amazing.
I mean, I didn't totally. I was part of the staff, and the two producers who made the story that won, or who we technically say won, but I think I could say it on like a Hinge date.
How are those Hinge dates going?
I just started to try to date again. It's interesting. I feel like I'm a different person than I last was when I was dating, and so I feel like it's a really different experience.
How often do you find that you're a different person? Does that every year? Is it?
I think I have this friend Henrietta who's like 96, and she once said this thing that really affected me, which is that she looks back at her life at all the people she was, and they are like distinct people. And I asked her who they were, and she kind of went through them. And it did sort of line up like decade to decade. You know, it was like she was a journalist in Latin America when she was in her 20s. And then she was a mother and she was married, you know, and that was her whole identity. And then, you know, after her husband died, she had this other identity. And then she became a person who worked in theater, and that was her whole identity. And then she left theater and she became a visual artist, and that was her whole identity. And they are almost like reincarnation within this one lifetime. You're just totally reborn. And I can say I've filtered through some very strong characters. I would say I've lived as very different people within the lifetime I've lived so far. And you've known a lot of those people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think of myself that way too, but I worry about whether or not it's a means of distancing yourself from taking full ownership of. There seem to be a lot of conversations where people say, you know, people are who you show them you are. And I think that, you know, so I wonder about, I'm constantly asking myself, like, am I escaping something from earlier in my life? I think also because my life I've moved around a lot, and you have too. So, I mean, physically, just location wise, as just one aspect of our lives. So when you have that experience of going to different schools as you're growing up, and sometimes in different countries, which you and I have both had, it does easily feel like you're sort of, now I'm this person at this place, right?
Yeah, and I think what you're asking is like, am I hiding out in these new identities from like dealing with the root issue? And I will say, like, I think to be specific about some of my identities, like I think they're like I was, I once existed in the world as like a fat woman. I like that was my identity. Then I lost 120 pounds, and the way I exist in the world and the way I'm treated or looked at is incredibly different. So I actually feel like a fish who's in like swimming in totally different water. And then like I was Mormon. Yeah. And the way I perceived the world, like the narrative as I walked through the world was like Satan was tempting me. Everything was a test. Like when I got on the subway, if I saw an attractive man sitting across from me, I was like, oh, that's, Satan and his helpers are trying to encourage me to be sexual and I have to stop. Now I just see a hot guy on the train. Like the way I like perceive and actually narrate my life is so different than it was when I was Mormon. But I think, but I think what you're saying fundamentally, like I think the root stuff is usually like attachment issues from early childhood. Like it can, just because you've changed your settings, just because you've changed the way you think, doesn't mean that the behavior won't just like try on a new costume and appear in a different way. So like I battle shame. I've always had like major issues with shame. And no matter what new persona I've taken on, shame just comes in a totally different form.
Right. That I think I think that's in part the question I'm asking. And I also wanted to know, what else do you find is actually consistent through all these people identities? Is there anything else?
I'm like, well, shame is consistent. No. What else is consistent? Having a sense of humor is totally consistent.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. What was the story that you told me once about getting out of going to church and the turning out, or like?
So with Mormonism, you have to wake up before school and go to like basically Bible study, but it's Book of Mormon and Bible study, and it starts at 6 a.m. And I am not a morning person. So you have to get up by 5 to get ready for school, to drive there, to get there by 6. And I was just dragging my feet to do it because you do it from freshman year until your senior year. And so freshman year, as I started, Tina, who, my older sister, who's like, she's a lawyer now. She's very responsible. She's such a do-gooder. She just always does the right thing. She was 2 years older. So she'd been waking up every morning for 2 years going to this. And I now that it's my turn, she wakes me up and I just immediately start like being such a bitch to Tina every morning. I'm basically trying to annihilate Tina's faith so she stops wanting to go, so she stops having to wake me up. So I try really hard to just basically ruin Tina. 3 months in, that doesn't work. So then I'm like, okay, I got a new tactic to not have to wake up early. So I realized I could sneak into Tina's room at night and unplug her alarm clock and plug it back in, and then she wouldn't wake up in time. But then Tina started like, I don't know if she totally caught on, but she started like locking the door. So I was like, I can't do that. And then I realized that the power, you open that little box and the power switches. The thing for the whole house was actually in my bedroom. And so I would stay up. And there are 5 kids in my family. My dad has a job. My mom would do substitute teaching. Everyone had responsibilities, but I would stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning when I knew everyone was asleep, pull the power switch. And in the morning, it was basically like that scene in Home Alone where they're running to get to the airport. The morning my dad...
Yeah, because you're one of many kids.
Yeah. Every kid is late for school. My dad's late for work. Everyone's screaming, running. And I would just be sitting. It'd be 10 or 11. I'd be sitting in my room smiling I got the best night's sleep. And then it escalated because I knew I couldn't do it that much or I would be caught. So I would just... But of course, eventually I started to get greedy and I would do it at least once a week. And then my parents hired an electrician to come look at the house, and they spent money on rewiring and then they also bought battery powered alarms. And so I couldn't do it anymore.
Oh my God, that's so funny. That's so great. Is that person still with you?
Yeah, I would say that person, the manipulative, selfish one, I think that's the strongest character who's made it through everything from being married to being divorced. Yeah, that one, I mean, that one I think
do you have a name for that person?
Oh, I actually kind of do. I realized, because I had been I work with a monk named Sokuzan, who I've been working with for like 5 years. And when you are working on certain things, I'll like Skype with him. So I Skyped with my monk when I spent several months. I took a sabbatical from This American Life, and I spent several months, and my entire purpose for those months was to look at shame and really get to the bottom of how much shame has been secretly driving all of the destructive choices in my life. And so as I was like doing all this work and research and trying to understand that for this thing I've been writing, I talked to my monk about it, and he was like, well, you can't look at shame without looking at pride, because they're two sides of the same coin. And I was like, sorry, that doesn't sound like me. I just have shame. I have no pride. That's crazy. I just don't behave like a prideful person. And then only recently I started to actually see, like, it's about half and half. So the name for that character is the Queen. She's just like, okay. She hates working. She hates like lifting a finger. She doesn't know why everyone isn't just waiting on her. I mean, and I don't behave like that in the world, but like the fussiness that I will feel sometimes is because there's this character in me that's just like, why am I not a queen?
Appropriately named. Well, so I wanted to ask you, so now part of your job is interviewing people, typically as part of an audio essay format. Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know, we call it stories.
Yeah, sure.
Audio essay.
Hey, look, I'm just trying to satisfy the queen here. You've become an expert interviewer. Do you start with a premise and then do you seek to confirm it, or do you find out what the story is in process and then change direction accordingly? Is it about 50-50?
I mean, usually, I mean, it depends, but for the most part, I've done some sort of a pre-interview, or I've been pitched a story, so I know what the arc of the story is. Yeah. And then I'm making that story. Sometimes it'll be more reporting like in the field, and then that you're much more on your feet, but you still are using a structure or a roadmap to follow. And then things can totally shift or change, but at least you know like what you want and what you're looking for. So it's not so amorphous. And yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, for me, I tend to like map it out, and I know, especially if I've done a pre-interview, I know, like, I have a really good memory, so I know what moments I want to like make sure that they tell me that were the most exciting or got me the most curious, like a well-told story. And then so I'll have questions that lead to making sure I get that tape. But then I also have like things I've thought about after, about like, well, what motivated that? How did that make you feel? Like, what did you want? That are kind of theories that I run by the person. And usually that's where the new like tape for the interview comes from, where it's unexpected for both of us. And then that'll lead to like just conversation and often like you'll feel as you're listening to an interview when both sides are totally engaged and surprised, like that energy comes across.
Okay, that's great. That's really fascinating. And so, do you look for, is emotion a big part of what you're looking for? Is that one of those elements that you think, oh, this is a great moment that we got? Do you look for change moments when people talk about what changed in their life? Is it that kind of?
Yeah. I mean, when I look at a story, it's like it is like beginning, middle, and end. What did the person want? What did they actually need? And at what point did they sort of realize like in pursuit of getting what they wanted. Like, I made this choice, then I did this, then I did that, and that led to this. All these unexpected things start to happen to them. And as those unexpected things happen to them, often what they want shifts as they begin to realize like the root of the problem or what's really going on. And so as I track the story, I look at like who they were at the beginning and who they were at the end, and what changed. And usually I like to know like what the most I structure or I build the story once I know what the kind of climax or epiphany of the story is. That helps me understand like where to begin. Like the whole story is building up to making sure that moment we understand all the emotional stakes, we understand the realization. And so I do tend to like take that moment. For me is the most important moment for understanding how to structure the story.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I feel I'm trying to go about this, I think, in a similar way. But yeah, I was just curious, and I think that's really helpful for folks who are interested in storytelling in this in that format, in a video format, which I think there's a lot of work now for this kind of. There seems to be a lot of work now for video essays, audio essays, podcasting, etc. You've been doing this for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at This American Life for about over 10 years. And the other thing that I think is really central that I learned from Ira is that a person will not engage with your story until they care, until they essentially relate or see themselves in your shoes. And the best way to get somebody to care or put themselves in your shoes is for you to really clearly spell out what you want. And usually there's a level of like feeling or emotion that's driving why you want that so bad. And that makes us care. And once we care, then we put empathy kicks in, and we think like, well, if I were them, what would I do to get that? And then as you do it, we might be thinking, that's exactly what I would do. Or we might be thinking like, oh my God, that is a hilarious like leap. Like if I wanted like it's so character is revealing based on like the choices that you make. So like one person to find love might do one thing that's fairly straightforward, and like so many of my stories in retrospect involve like me wanting to find love and me doing the most batshit crazy thing that doesn't make any sense to get it. But in my mind is totally like the next logical step. And so that's where the comedy comes in, is like, you're like, well, I was on board with finding love, but I don't know if that's the right way to do it. But you also like, you relate because the thing that I want is universal. We all want love. We want to be seen. We want intimacy, we want connection. And so we sure do, yeah. If you get people on board with that like thing that they, because in fact I just told this story over the weekend, and one of the people listening, like in the beginning of the story I talk about being Mormon and it's about like something I did for love as a Mormon, and the person who was hearing the story like grew up with no religious background whatsoever, but they were like, I totally relate because I was a late bloomer. So people will weirdly find their way into your shoes, even if it's highly specific and it's not an experience that they personally lived. In fact, often the more specific you are about like what's actually happening inside of your head and what you're feeling, and the more vulnerable you are about what you're going through, and like the more you kind of are honest and expose that, often I would say shame or things that you hate, like the thing that you don't want to admit out loud. When you say that, that's the thing that everyone's like, oh my God, I feel that too. I find that in my work, that's what I get the most response to, are the things that I was like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's actually the truth. And if I don't say it, no one will understand why I'm making any of these choices.
So on your episode of High Maintenance, there is a moment when one of your fellow producers is recording their husband without them knowing it.
Yes.
Does that happen? Are the producers of This American Life going around recording people and then telling them afterwards that they were recorded?
No. And actually, that was one of the big things that the staff were like,
about.
I don't know if this is this the correct representation of the show? But here's the thing. That episode was actually based on me and on an experience where I recorded my then husband, Mark. And Ben, who made High Maintenance, it was the This American Life episode about it's called Tell Me I'm Fat, and it started with a piece by Lindy West, and it had a piece by Roxane Gay, and a story by myself about this transition where I had lost a tremendous amount of weight and been treated differently in the world. And as I was making that episode, I was really digging into stuff I'd never really thought about or talked about, and some of it had to do with the ways that men treated me differently or men being attracted to me. And part of it, I had read this book, Dietland, and the book had really inspired me, and I wanted to kind of tell the audience about what I'd gotten from this book. So I kept trying to write a paragraph about what that book was about, and every time I told the paragraph in different edits, everyone was just like, it feels like a weird book report out of nowhere. So I kept trying to make it shorter, and then I was with Mark, and I started just telling him what the book was about, and I was telling him so clearly, it was so succinct and just conversational, that I was like, oh my God, can I record this? So I took my phone and I recorded it, and I don't even normally do that. I think this might be the first time I ever did that. I took my phone and I recorded it. The recording of me explaining what the book is about finishes, and then it very quickly leads into a conversation about how and my husband was he's just he was a captain of a football team. He was just a kind of all-American, traditionally handsome man. And
yeah.
You remember.
Sure. Yeah.
And
I remember this recording. I remember hearing this on the radio.
And so I say to him, but you would never have loved me if I was fat. I can't remember exactly what I said. But he acknowledges that that's true. And it was really, I wasn't expecting him to be that direct or honest about it, even though I think a part of me deep down in my heart had been afraid of that or suspected that that could be true. And so you hear in this recording, me, taking that in. And it's just, it's really it's hard for me to listen to it because it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And
it is a little hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I felt too, listening to it. Yeah.
And I also, in a sense, he kind of, I think it was hard to put that out there because I was worried that he would be villainized for saying it. But he felt strongly a lot of men don't talk about this. And I think it'll open up a bigger conversation. And if this is my part in the conversation, I support you putting this recording, because essentially it was one of those accidental things where I recorded it. I would never have just come up with now let me interrogate my husband about whether he would love me if I was fat. It just happened. And he gave me permission to use it, and we ended up, it was the end of the story. And so Ben, who makes High Maintenance, when he had sort of originally conceived of the episode of High Maintenance, I think for him, a lot of it was about mining your private life for stories and what that does, and how does that interfere with your life. And I think that probably had something to do with also, Ben mining his own life as a creator in the way that we all do, and grappling with at what point do you, let's say you have a story that happens with your family or your parents, and it so captures a lesson that you think is was a huge epiphany for you and you wish you could share with others, but if you share it, you compromise your relationship with the people you love the most, and you risk losing that relationship. And so I think he was interested in that as a concept or a theme, as something he's explored in his own life. And so he based that High Maintenance episode off of the episode of This American Life that I was in, very loosely.
Interesting. Okay. So By the way, you're the first person in this whole series that I'm interviewing after I started rolling out our first season episodes. We threw up a trailer with your name on it because I knew we would make this one happen, because even though you are very busy, typically with work, you're actually one of my best friends.
Yeah.
If that's not obvious to people at this point. You're now the person on this show that I've known the longest. Some of the folks on here I met freshman year of college. You and I met in 8th grade in the UK at the American School. We went on to do high school plays together. We did International Honor Drama Week and things like that. We also went to prom together. And then we went to college together and mostly hung out a lot in Alphabet City.
Yep. I have so many memories of, I can tell you. So I have a memory of the first time I ever saw you. Ever?
I don't
know if it's the first time I saw you, but it was the first time, it was, we went on a school trip to Norway. And we were on this drama trip together. And I have a memory of you from that trip. And I had the biggest crush on you.
You did?
Oh my God. I totally, on that trip, I was and I was so awkward and not cool and, braces and fat and just pining about you. I remember pining, but and then we became friends. But then I feel in high school because then I moved away and then I moved back.
You went away and then you came back. I remember you from that trip, and I do remember when you came back, because I remember I was in a class with you and I was like, oh, I was like, this person is back. I didn't know if to be absolutely honest, I probably was like, oh, Elna's back, but I cannot remember. I do remember you being in that class and being like, I know her. But I think the thing about the high school that we went to was that people left all the time. So it's not like you kept a person, I wouldn't say that I kept many people sort of in mind, because there was always this thing that somebody's, their whatever their parents did, that business was going to move them to another country. That was typical in our school.
Yeah, it's basically we went to an expat school.
Yeah, that's right. So, but I remember when you came back, and I think you and I have spoken since, and I think that you had said that when you did come back, you had changed into kind of a new person, maybe.
I don't know if I think when I remember coming back, and it was really hard for me at first. I was really lonely. I didn't really have friends. And I was of that, I think, because of the way this has to do with personal confidence, but I also think there is a layer of social judgment around being friends with somebody who's fat, that I felt that I was a liability for people to hang out with or be seen with, and that I felt a lot of judgment. And so people weren't warming up to me. And so I would say for at least the end of my junior year, I was really miserable. And then I came back senior year, and I don't know how I shifted it, but I just honestly, I think behind the scenes, I just tried to work every person so that so that they were my friend. So I just would do a lot of one-on-ones with people. And maybe
glad handing, a politician?
Yeah. Just found out what people wanted to talk about, what their needs were. I was just super helpful. And honestly, I think some of it was having a sense of humor, but I certainly I worked everyone individually, I felt until having me around in groups or socially, and maybe this has to do with, honestly, in retrospect, my own comfort level, because I can be shy in groups, but one-on-one, I am able to feel a connection or intimacy that isn't. I've always been really afraid of being seen, whether I knew it or not, which is as someone who's performed in front of big audiences, I think people would not expect that. But definitely for that, it's once I step onto the stage and I can't leave the stage, it's I rip the Band-Aid off and I have no choice. But
yeah, right.
But being on camera and doing that kind of stuff has been excruciatingly hard for me, because there's no.
Do you mean still to this day?
Still to this day, and I think I am getting better at it. But
oh my gosh,
I feel so much more exposed by the camera being there because there's not like a big audience or people to connect with. So I just feel like someone is zooming in and that there's no hiding out. Like you can see me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We got into a bunch of trouble together at one time because one night.
Oh my God. I just remembered this.
I'm not going to protect you at all here. This was at your urging.
It was.
You said to me, hey, there's this garden or there's this museum that's over on this side of town.
I would pass by this museum all the time on the First Avenue bus, and I would see this statue of George slaying this dragon. And I was always on the bus, so I never walked by it because it was in Midtown. So I was like, I always wanted to go to this garden, Claude. Oh my God, no. Here's how it started. Claude took me to a play that he was like, it's going to be a really good play. He made up all this shit about how wonderful the play was. We sat in this play. It was the worst. It was like a one-woman show about just. We've all been to that play. And it was...
But wait a minute, you said Claude. You're saying I took you to a show?
Yeah, you took me to a show. You talked me into going to the show that you said was going to be amazing.
Oh, and it was terrible?
And it was terrible. And halfway through the show,
I
I told you, I hate you. And you were like, yeah, I lied. I just didn't want to go to this alone. I thought it might be terrible.
I see what you're doing. You're talking directly to the audience
yes.
here. Okay.
And so then
you're commandeering this story.
And then you said to me, because I kept poking you as the play got longer and longer. I think it was like 3 hours or something, 4 hours. I kept poking you, and you said, as soon as this ends, I promise we'll do whatever you want to do. Like, what's your dream, right? So, then I spent the second half of the play just thinking, okay, Claude's going to do anything I want to do. What's the thing I want to do the most? And so as soon as it ended, I was like, there's this garden I've always wanted to go to. I've never passed by it. It's in Midtown. And so you're like, fine, I'll go to this garden with you. So we get to the garden, and there's
Tell them where the garden is.
Well, I didn't know. So at this point, the garden is just along the water. There are... There's a shortish fence. The fence wasn't that long.
I gotta jump in here to tell the folks this.
Because you did say, you were like, I think this is the United Nations.
So it's next to the United Nations building. So we don't know if it's part of the United Nations building or not. But I saw it and immediately was like, I think this is part of the United Nations
And I was
building.
like, no, that's the United Nations.
Continue.
There's flags. It's a this is a park. That's the United Nations. And you're like, I think it's the United Nations. And I was like, oh, please, look at this fence. This fence, you could hop this fence.
This is maybe 2 years after September 11th
yes.
occurred. Yeah.
So I'm like, if this were the United Nations, the fence would be so much higher. There'd be security. And I'm like...
It was shockingly very little amount of a physical barrier. It was literally a loose chain that was knee level that we stepped over.
No. We kind of had to pop over something. But yeah, it wasn't much. Yeah, it wasn't much. It was like we hopped a fence. So I was like, if this is the United Nations, someone would stop me from doing this. And then I hopped over the fence, and then I'm on the other side, and I'm like, eh. And then you were like, fine, and you hopped over the fence after me. And then we walked through this garden, and there were really pretty statues, and then we kind of you could see the waterfront. It was nice. It was nice for I think.
Yeah, it was nice.
Maybe we were there for 15 minutes or something, right?
We were there for, maybe 10 minutes because once we got down to the water and we were looking out at that, I think that PepsiCo sign on the other side of the Hudson, there were flashlights on us.
Yeah, multiple flashlights.
And what happened? What do you remember happening next?
That security, they were
United Nations security.
United Nations security. We had broken into the United Nations. And and I was like,
the untrustworthy narrator, Elna Baker.
So at this point, I still think I can handle this. So I'm like, oh, no, sorry. This is a huge misunderstanding. We thought this was a park. We're now learning from you that it's the United Nations. We'll go. Thank you. Yeah. And they were like, no, you've broken into the United. We have to bring you into the building and interrogate you. And I was like, oh, no, you don't have to do that because it was a misunderstanding. And so they take us into the United Nations, and then they took, and I'm still sort of a deer in headlights, a little like, oh, this isn't a big deal though, right? They'll get it. And you are like white as a ghost. And you are like basically like, I hate you, Elna. Like, like you were so afraid, but also mad at me.
They took us underground in an elevator, which is fucked up. Like, you never want to go underground in most elevators, let alone at the UN building. They brought us into a bullpen down there and sat us in a cubicle.
They separated us too.
Did they fucking separate us?
Yeah, they separated us.
And I'm sitting there going like, I wonder if they know that I'm Middle Eastern. Like, I was so out of my... I was like, this is not... There's no way out of this that is going to be good. We're going to have a file on us forever for doing this.
Yeah. And then I think they asked us questions separately, and then they did ask us questions together, too.
That's what I remember. I remember us, but now that you say they separated us, I guess I could see it. Yeah.
Yeah, they separated us at the beginning, and then we came back, and I think there was just a moment. I do remember a whispery moment where you're like, I'm sure we'll be fine. And you're like, I'm Middle Eastern. Don't you know I'm Middle Eastern?
Yeah, and of course, it's like nobody's gonna know that from my name or my fucking face. But like, I was terrified. It does say something about how I was feeling about being Middle Eastern at that time in New York City.
How were you feeling about it?
Bad.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean you talk about shame. I mean that's a thing I think that I was feeling about it, and but I mean. We were very lucky that nothing ever came of that afterwards. Now you were doing other things like that.
Well, no. So hold on. You have to the end of the story.
There's a kicker.
There's the kicker, which is that we were there for like maybe an hour and a half, and then they did let us go. But as they were escorting us out, they said that our names are on file and we are never allowed in the United Nations again.
Holy shit, is that true?
Yeah, that's what they said.
I mean, that makes sense.
I don't know if it's true. I've never tried to go back, but I've also never gone back because I feel I'm blacklisted. So
the United States leads the world in data collection. We are definitely on a list.
But we saw that park with that dragon.
I hate you, Elna. No, I'm just kidding. I don't at all. You took stories like these and started winning the Moth Grand Slam with them. Am I right?
Yeah, I hadn't known there was like storytelling or like a world or like I just told stories to friends really. And then heard that someone eventually was like, oh, you mean like the Moth? And I was like, I don't know what that is. So I went to the Moth, and just because I'd been like telling stories, and actually it's so funny, like earlier when I was saying, like you said, like glad handing, like I was like working people. Yeah. In high school. Actually, I honestly truly believe that the only reason I know how to tell stories is that was what I used to make friends. So I would tell people funny stories, and that would like make them see me as a person, I think. And then all their kind of their hesitancy to be friends with me because I like was like a social liability would kind of, they saw me, I humanized myself by telling stories, I think. And so I had been practicing or telling stories to people over and over and over again. So when I did the Moth, I ended up like winning, or I ended up winning. It's such a dumb idea that you can win for telling stories, but not to.
Well, but it's very fun. The whole process of watching the Moth is very fun, and this was over at the Nuyorican Cafe, which is historic.
And this was like early days of the Moth. So I kind of got into the beginning of the Moth in the world of storytelling, and is kind of what launched my career.
Because then what ended up, as I recall, you had a day job at Nobu hosting, and there had been some people, I think, from Elle magazine who had seen you at a Moth, and then they came in to your day job, and you, because you have great hustle, and you always have, you used to have a philosophy, as I recall, of just saying, like, just ask for things and see what happens. And these folks came in, and you pitched your story as an article, and then you wrote that article. Am I right?
Yeah, and then that article got me a book deal. So it was very, and I would say like I have great hustle, but it's like, I think anyone like it was certainly that moment. Like they came in, I recognized them. Well, actually, they came into the restaurant, and first they recognized me, and they were like, "Oh, we saw you at the Moth. Like, where are you sitting?" And I was like, "Oh,
like,
I'm sitting people. Like, I work here. I'm not like what you think I am." And so then I went back to like sitting, hostessing, and then I just kept thinking, I was like, I should tell them like I have an idea for a piece. And so I was so nervous, and it is like, I feel like there's so many movies where it's the scene where somebody is like at a cafe and they see, James Franco, and they have a script with them and they're like, I gotta, and they're like sweating or whatever. In fact, there's a Seinfeld episode where Kramer does that to Fred Savage, where he gives him his script. And it's really, really funny. But it is that sort of premise where you like, you're putting yourself on the line.
Fred Savage.
And like, I don't think that comes naturally. Like, you made it sound like the thing like that comes naturally to me. It does not come naturally to me, like to ask for opportunities. And so if you're a person that it doesn't come naturally to, like that doesn't mean, like, you can still get yourself to do it. You just sort of have to like jump off the diving board.
Right. No, sure. To say it's easy is probably not the right, but sometimes there's a voice inside you that just says like you have to. Maybe is that?
Yeah, and this, and also it felt like I don't know. It felt like it's so hard to say like meant to be, but it felt like the thing fell into my lap in a certain way where if I didn't advocate for myself. It's like, it's like when there's a clear moment in a relationship where like you could either tell someone you love them or like a clear moment where you could break up, this almost like the universe hands the script where this is the right moment to say the thing and you just feel it. And so for me, it felt like this is a moment handed to me where I could do this thing or not do it. And if I don't do it, I'll be kicking myself. So I have to do it.
And the result was your, in a roundabout way, was your first memoir called The New York Regional Mormon Singles Halloween Dance.
Yes.
And it talked a little bit about, or a lot about, some of the stuff we've already talked about, but also about dating life, right? Like there was a section, there were parts of the book that were, I think, really dedicated to finding love.
Yep.
Now, so you are working on a follow-up novel, is that right?
Yes. I mean, I've written another memoir that I'm like, I don't know, man. I've written a lot, and then I took a sabbatical from This American Life to write it, and I took about 4 months, and I went down to Mexico to live on this horse farm in the middle of nowhere. And this was in like the end of February, like February 29th is when I left. And at the time it was like so extreme. I wasn't going to have internet, no cell service. I was basically like going to be dropping off the face of the earth to focus. And all my friends in New York were like, you need a boyfriend. Like you just need a boyfriend. Oh, like you're going on this like soul searching quest.
To what? To go down there with you? Is
no, they meant like, cause I felt like I was like,
oh, okay.
I was like, I need to understand what's truly wrong with me. I need to understand like what's going on. I want to like soul search. And the only way to do that is to drop off the face of the earth. And then all my friends were like, or get a boyfriend. Like you might just be lonely. And then I got there, and a week or maybe 2 weeks later is when New York went into quarantine. And all those same friends were like, how did you know? It was like, are you a witch? So I basically missed like I feel like
what was going on in New York at the time.
Oh, and even what was going on in the world in many ways, because I was isolated on a rural farm in the mountains with horses. Like there was no interaction, there were no masks, like I was alone. So I missed it's all. I feel like returning, I feel that such a strong sense of the world has gone through like such a trauma, and everyone is like experiencing PTSD, and the trauma is ongoing. We're still living in it. So yeah, I do feel like I kind of missed like a pivotal thing that happened to the whole world.
We spoke around that time when you were down there working, and then the next time we spoke was about being on this series, and you had, in that period of time, you had gotten coronavirus, And so you are the first person on this series who has had it. And you are recovered now?
I am recovered, but I would say like I am just barely feeling back to myself. And I think it took about 8 weeks to get it out of my system.
You said to me that you had also gotten typhoid fever. Is that true?
Yeah. So I had salmonella and that led to typhoid fever. And then I also tested positive for like a couple parasites. And I was just really, really sick. And so I flew back to go to the hospital I'd sent my results to some doctors here and they were like, you need to come back to the US. So I flew back to go to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, I also tested positive for corona. So a lot of like the severity of my symptoms or what was going on with me physically was corona, and I hadn't known it.
I'm so sorry that you went through this horrible experience. I mean, I'm so relieved that you're okay now. How comfortable are you talking about your experience with COVID?
I'm totally comfortable talking about it. I think the thing that is useful to know is that I also had typhoid fever. So, like, if someone's listening to this with like trying to understand the symptoms, like it's a little confusing of a case because it's hard to say what was what. But I can definitely talk about what I think was corona and what it felt like to go through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, so I flew back, went to the hospital, and I had assumed that based on how sick I was feeling that I would just be kept in the hospital. But, I tested positive for corona, and the results, like anything they could do for typhoid fever, my vitals were like not severe enough that they felt they needed to keep me, and they needed hospital beds. So there was no place in my mind. I was like, I'm flying home to be in a hospital because I could die. And then I got to the hospital and they were like, okay, now go back home and be like by yourself. And so
terrifying.
That part was really terrifying because I just didn't know how sick I was, and I didn't know what would happen to me. And I also hadn't expected that I would have corona, and there's all the unknowns that come with corona. And so I went home and I started having like fever dreams where you kind of lose your sense of, it felt a little like how I've heard a psychotic break described, where I just had a dream where I lost like a sense of, I felt like I was losing my mind or something. And then I became very afraid that I wouldn't get my mind back. And then I woke up from this dream and I called a friend and they kind of talked me down. And then I spent the next 21 days in isolation, and just basically like everything that could come up with my immune system would just pop up. So it's like, and I have a friend who's a coronavirus specialist who's like a talking head on CNN. So I would Facebook message him like new symptoms. And then I also had another doctor to talk to at the hospital. And I've never had an experience with doctors where everything you say, they just sort of shrug and they're like, could be. You're like, is this corona?
Oh, God.
Could be. Like it's just, I mean, and that's because they just don't know. You were like living in this total uncertainty. Mostly I had severe nausea, which I hadn't known was a symptom of corona, but I had severe nausea, loss of smell, extreme achiness where like you couldn't get comfortable, like your body just like was so brittle, and then exhaustion, like where I would stand up and like have to sit down because I passed out one time, and mostly it was just like weakness and kind of just like coming in and out of yourself. You're just like sleeping it off, but like when you stood, you felt like foggy. And I didn't have any respiratory problems at all, which was really reassuring. But then like I started to get random symptoms, which were just my immune system breaking down. And one of them I like looked in the mirror and I had a reddish circle the size of an orange around my asshole. And I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, oh, okay. And it was one of those things where you're like, is that what my asshole looks like? Like, you just don't know. I don't spend time looking at it. But then you're also living in a world where everything is a symptom. Like, everything ends up being an actual symptom. You're not wrong. You're like I had all these dots all over me, and I thought it was because I laid in grass. And then it was a rash from typhoid fever. So, like, every single thing that was happening to me was a symptom of one of the things I was going through. So I see this, and I mean, but I'm also like, maybe that's just what assholes look like. I just never knew. And like, I did want to like call all my exes and be like, hey, sorry, I know we haven't talked in a year, but would you just
tell me what my asshole
could you just
looks
describe my asshole? I mean, I want this to be a blind. I don't want to tell you what I think it looks like. So just go, what does my asshole look like? And so then I'm panicking, and I didn't want to Google it because sometimes when you Google things, you just spiral even more. So my first thought was I messaged the coronavirus expert that's on CNN. And so then I was like, hey, this is a bit of an overshare, but I have a red circle around my asshole the shape of an orange. Is that coronavirus? And he just wrote back like, not that I know of. And I just,
on top of everything else, the shame of
the total shame, and also I totally
the
picture
CNN talking head person
I know
being like,
I
that's
like
fucking gross.
I like imagining him being on CNN and he gets like a phone alert and he looks down and there's like somewhere an image of him going like ugh, ugh. But one of the
God,
things
I'm so glad that there's humor in this harrowing story.
But I will say, so the thing that I feel like it's hard to give people advice because coronavirus is so individual. But the thing that I do think might be helpful for people to think about is that so that the second day was a day where I was like waiting on all these results, and I didn't know if I had severe, like my liver tests were coming back abnormal, and there were more things that could be wrong with me. And so I was in this like really like the panic of feeling like I could die or something, like, you know. And I was never
I'm so sorry that I didn't know this at the time. I feel horrible.
Well, I think that's a big part of what's happening to people as they go through this disease is like we're all so isolated that it's hard for us to even support each other or even know what's going on with one another. But and again, like the part of this that was so hard was I was completely alone. Like I was and so I was really afraid. And I have a friend who has been through the hospital process a lot and sickness a lot because his wife had cancer. And so I had the presence of mind to just call him and ask for advice. And he said this thing that was so helpful, which was like, basically like, there are things that you can control and things that you can't, that are fears, you know? And so you're grappling with the fear of dying, you're grappling with these things, and you also have these other fears. And just divide them on a list and see if there's any one of these fears that you can like create a backup plan for. So like one of my fears was like because of these fever dreams are coming in and out. And I don't think I was ever as sick as this makes it sound, but then the fear is what if you are? So I had been afraid that something could happen and no one would know and I would be alone and my case would like spike and no one would know. So I had my friend Aisha agree to text me every hour, and then I reached out to people in my building. I'm not really close with anyone in my building, but I found someone in the building who, if Aisha texted and didn't hear from me, she could call them and they would come knock on my door. And just the very idea that if people like that, I wouldn't be like going into some like, and again, part of this has to do with I know nothing about anything that has to do with the body or like science. So then you're like, cardiac arrest? If I go into cardiac, I don't even like the lack.
Right. Or a stroke or
the lack of knowing, which I don't even think those things happen because of typhoid fever or corona. But this is where all your ignorance kicks in and you're just like, the death could happen. So I think one of the things that if you, it is wise or helpful now while you're healthy to put a plan in place for like things that you could prepare for if you do get corona and you are alone. And you know, and that involves like I had to get a pulse oximeter, but that took three days to arrive. So, or I also had like it attacks your immune system, and so there were things that like I kept getting yeast infections, or I kept like the ring around my asshole is when I get sick. I usually get
it was just the tip of the asshole.
It was the ring around my asshole is I usually get strep when I get sick. That's like an immune system thing for me, and so I got anal strep, like butt strep. I didn't know that existed.
Oh
but
my god!
So
oh my god.
One of the symptoms of my I mean, it really does. You're like, I am breaking down. I got butt strep, and so even if there are medications that like if you, because it's a blood disease, so it's like things are coming up that happen to you when your immune system breaks down. So if you know, like when I get run down and stressed out, I always get a sore throat, or I always get this thing or the other thing. Like getting those like vitamins or medications on hand, like in advance, again, like
to treat the various symptoms.
So you don't have to wait for things to arrive. And then again, I am describing like a case of corona that isn't respiratory. So if it is respiratory, like this is a whole different scenario. I'm describing like the more flu-like symptoms of corona, where it's just like you're battling it. But then the thing, and then also having like knowing the people you can talk to, your support network, like just having everything almost like the way that 72-hour kits exist, or people used to have like emergency like phone trees at school before we had like phones to text and everything. Like having a system in place that's your backup plan for when shit hits the fan is something I wish I'd done in advance that people can do now.
Have doctors told you that your life will now forever be different?
No, they have not said that, but they've said basically what they've said that they don't know. So they just don't know, like, and that's the part that you just kind of try not to think about. And honestly, I'm at a place where I went back in. My liver numbers are still abnormal. They're not like as frightening. So I have to go back in next week to get tested on that again to see if there's like permanent liver damage. And they also just don't know if it's going to be something like Lyme disease, where you have flare-ups and then they go away. But I will say, like, for 8 weeks, that's what was happening to me. So it went on a lot longer than I would have expected, where basically I would have good days where I was, like, full of energy and I was like, oh, my God, I'm back. I knew I could beat this disease or whatever virus. And then I would totally...
It's like another wave.
I would totally crash. I would be bedridden. I would just not be able to get out of bed. And I knew the difference because it would essentially be defined by me laying in bed being like, I should go to the bathroom. I should. Yeah. I should really get up and go to the bathroom. And you just do that for like an hour. That's how you know something's different. If you're just lying in bed telling yourself to do something, that's how you know you have no energy. And then the other thing that really concerned me, and I feel like so relieved now about, is that I had a lot of anxiety. And I felt like in this kind of fight or flight mode where I was just on edge and feeling anxious all the time. And I have had issues with depression before, but I've never had issues with severe anxiety. And I started to wonder if that was like the new normal for me or something. And I have read, and I think this is true to my experience, that you can experience anxiety as a result of corona.
I just want to say I'm so sorry that that you went through all of that, and I feel horrible that I wasn't aware that it was going on at the time. But thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing all of that.
You're welcome. You're like, thank you for sharing about the orange on your asshole. All of that. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Maybe not that part. No, it was great. Well, listen, you're my oldest and my most interesting friend by a mile. You've always been ahead of the curve in terms of where the culture is headed. You have incredible confidence in your projects and your convictions. I often look to your career, and have done for a long time, as a kind of a guide. Thank you for doing this.
That's so sweet. It's like a really cool thing to hear. Thank you.
See, I wrote some stuff down. Some of it's all right?
Yeah, look at you. You're good at this.
Please stay healthy.
I will. I'll stay alive.
To everyone out there, if you listened all the way to the end of this 9th episode, you deserve a thanks on our social media because this episode was long. Message us on Instagram at Things Are Going Great For Me, and we'll give you a shout out in our IG stories. Give us a subscribe and those sweet 5-star ratings, a nice comment, and we'll return the favor by bringing you even more quality content in the future. Stay tuned, because we've got just one more episode left in Season 1, including interviews with Tembi Locke and Vinny Chibber. Our sound engineer is Christopher Frontiero, and our series composer is Cormac Bluestone. Our series graphics editor is Dan Olszewski. You guys are champs for sticking around this long. Hit us up on Instagram. Let us know if you enjoyed this episode. Oh, by the way, we also have an email available on there, so give us your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. See you next time.